Good evening, everyone. As we all know, this month is June 2021. We are extremely thankful to have you all reach and be able to see our milestone to celebrate the first anniversary of the organization of our group, which is the Anti-Racist.Jubilee.Symposia. Our goal is, of course, celebrate, educate, and cultivate.
One of our defining statements on June 19th, 2020 was Juneteenth is a rare moment for our communities to proclaim in one voice that Black lives matter and that we won't tolerate anything less than justice for all of our people. We organized on the cusp of the murder of George Floyd. You know the story, you participated in the rallies, you supported us throughout the nation. Thank you. We have not, nor will we relent from our vision and objectives.
Our Anti-Racist Jubilee Symposia platform is one where we will continue to celebrate our history and many contributions African Americans have made to this nation. We will continue to educate ourselves and inviting others to do the same as we strive to break down racist barriers, one event, one speaker, one story at a time. With the reality that we are the most powerful when we are together, we will continue cultivating partnerships with many others.
Today, 1 year later, in June 2021, we are more focused and definitely moving forward. At this time, we'll share a brief historical perspective on Juneteenth or June 19th. Now I'm passing the mic along to Jayden Jefferson, our speaker.
According to the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, Juneteenth, celebrated on June 19, is the name given to Emancipation Day by African Americans in Texas. On that day in 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger read General Order Number 3 to the people of Galveston. It stated, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and the rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere." Large celebrations on June 19 began in 1866 and continued regularly into the early 20th century. African Americans treated this day like the 4th of July, and the celebrations contained similar events. In the early days, Juneteenth celebrations included a prayer service, speakers with inspirational messages, reading of the Emancipation Proclamation, stories from former slaves, food, red soda water, games, rodeos, and dances. The celebration of June 19 as Emancipation Day spread from Texas to the neighboring states of Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. It also appeared in Alabama, Florida, California, as African American Texans migrated. In many parts of Texas, freed men and women purchased land or emancipation grounds for Juneteenth gatherings. Examples include Emancipation Park in Houston, purchased in 1872, which is now Booker T. Washington Park in Mexia, and Emancipation Park in Austin.
According to the State Historical Association, an independent nonprofit since 1897, Representative Al Edwards, a Democrat from Houston, introduced a bill calling for Juneteenth to become a state holiday. The state legislature passed the act in 1979. Governor William P. Clements Jr. signed it into law. The first state-sponsored Juneteenth celebration took place in 1980. And in succeeding years, Juneteenth has also had an impact outside of the state. African Americans, Texans who moved from Louisiana, Oklahoma, have taken celebrations with them. In 1991, the Constasia Museum of the Smithsonian Institution sponsored June 19 Freedom Revisited, featuring public speakers, African Americans' arts and crafts, and other cultural programs. There, as in Texas, the state of its origin, Juneteenth has provided the public the opportunity to recall the milestone in human rights, the day that represents African Americans.
Perhaps the most significant turning point in the contemporary recognition of Juneteenth occurred in 2020 in the wake of the death of former Houston resident George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. That year, immeasurable Juneteenth observations also called for police reforms. University of Texas African-American history professor Dana Ramey Berry, a guest for the New York Times Juneteenth podcast, noted, "When I think about Juneteenth as Emancipation Day, and I think about this moment, I feel like we still need to be emancipated." Opal Lee, a 93-year-old retired Fort Worth educator and civic leader, also saw the 2020 Juneteenth celebration as the opportunity to call greater attention to her more than 40-year quest to ensure that the day became a national holiday. By late June 2020, her petition to achieve the goal had reached 1 million signatures. Moreover, in 2020, residents in all major regions of the state observed the event, but due to the coronavirus pandemic that limited public gatherings, celebrations were held through online communication platforms, just like we did. Thus, in 2020, at a critical juncture in the state's and nation's history, Juneteenth became a celebration of freedom steeped in centuries-long struggle to end racism in America.
Paul and Ivy, thank you guys for that. And I really appreciate seeing so many people here today. This is very exciting. Thank you guys so much for turning up and showing up. And I hope you're going to show out today. At this point, it is my pleasure to introduce to you guys Joy Davis. Joy was very strategic in helping us structure this event today. Not only that, but I would say equally as important, Joy, like myself, is a Texan through and through. And we do say that with a lot of pride. It's just the way we are. But anyway, she's my sister in the movement. So Joy, thank you. Joy is also an active member of Move On, of which I am too, and other groups. It's been amazing to watch her journey as she seeks and advocates for the betterment of humanity. You will learn more about Joy in just a few minutes, but in the meantime, I would like for us to join together in welcoming my sister in the movement, Joy Davis. And Joy is going to introduce our guest for today.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at your wonderful event. I'm truly honored and excited to be here and to take part in your organization's first anniversary. And I hope there are many more to come. The work this group does is necessary, important, and it's truly just amazing. So our guest today, we have Daniel Cohen he's the co-founder of Indivisible Houston, and the organization is very well known for for the advocacy. One thing about Daniel is he always shows up. He does not just let the politics get into the way of direct action. He is a true ally to all of us, and I'm so very thankful that he's here today and that he is my friend. And also we have State Representative Ron Reynolds. I cannot say enough wonderful things about him. He shows up, he's active, he has been in the community for a long time. He supports families that are domestic violence survivors. He's done a lot through the pandemic, and he was also at the forefront of the Texas Democratic walkout, where they broke quorum to save our rights to vote and everything like that. So I'm super proud to have him here.
And on that note, I would like to introduce our lead. We have a very special person, even to myself. I feel thankful to even say this person is my younger cousin. So I'm glad to have him take it away. I'm going to introduce everybody to Jayden Jefferson. He is a multimedia journalist and anchor based in Toledo, Ohio. He has interviewed the likes of elected officials to influential celebrities. He is hopeful to attend college for communications and eventually land a job at the anchor desk, while giving him a platform to the voices of the unheard. Amid the pandemic, he has calm and steady reporting has kept residents informed and safe in the state of Ohio. Since 2019, Jayden has racked up over 200,000 plus views on his pages on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I would like to introduce you all to Jaden Jefferson.
I'd like to first thank you all for having me, and I am privileged to introduce some of the guests that we're going to have today as part of this roundtable discussion, including Representative Ron Reynolds, Joy Davis, as you just heard from, as well as Daniel Cohen, who runs the organization Indivisible Houston. So as we begin this panel, I want to first pose the question to all of you. What do you believe is your primary reason for the opposition to some of these voter reform bills that Republicans claim will help secure our elections?
Oh, I can go. Oh, you want to go, Ron? Go ahead, Ron.
No, ladies first.
Oh, thank you. I think it's to control, they're trying to maintain control. In Harris County, we flipped a lot of seats from Republican leadership, and now it's in the hands of people that look like me, in the hands of people that look like you, and they are afraid of that. And so that's why I believe all of these bills they're trying to pass under the guise of election integrity and things like that, it's a mess. It's not, it's because they can't prove that there was just rampant voter fraud. They have yet to do that. So the purpose is to try to control the narrative, to keep people like me and you from seeking power and maintaining power and moving to progressive policies that we need. And so it's fear. It's fear of what the world is beginning to look like. And so that fear is causing them to make all of these, to try to propose all of these bills that's taking away our rights and our power. And we're not going to let that happen. So I pass it to State Rep Ron Reynolds.
Well, Joy, I couldn't add much more than you've eloquently laid out. And first of all, happy anniversary. It's an honor to be on such a distinguished panel. And I am really just overjoyed. But I'll just tell you this. It is nothing much more than Jim Crow 2.0. It is an attempt by the Republicans to suppress the votes of Black and brown people that traditionally vote Democrat. They don't want to have to win with policies. In other words, trying to convince people why they should vote for their platforms because they stand for this issue or that issue. They know they don't do that. So what they want to do is to take away your precious fundamental right to vote that many of our ancestors fought and gave their lives for, making good trouble for, so that we have the precious fundamental right to vote. And we fought, many people's whose shoulders we stand on, for the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So they want to roll back those protections and be able to suppress votes so that they can maintain power. This is a power play. This is simply about winning at all costs. It doesn't mean that they want to be fair, that they want to be constitutional, that they want to be patriotic, that they want to be able to understand and preserve those voting protections. They simply want to remain in power by any means necessary. And they don't care if they disenfranchise, if they have a disparate impact among people of color or the disabled community, if it means that they can stay in power. And Joy, you're right. There's been no evidence of voter fraud. This is nothing but perpetuating the big lie promulgated by former President Trump that there was massive voter fraud and that's why he lost. They know that's not true, but they don't care. And so it's up to us to make sure that we continue to fight and speak truth to power and making sure that no voices are disenfranchised from underserved, marginalized communities that typically are Black and brown.
I'm not sure I could say it any better than Joy and the representative have said it. But I did want to say briefly that I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be here with so many people who have worked with to try to fight some of this in the past, and also the fellow siblings from the Indivisible movement that I see here and friends who are fighting. And it's an honor to see new faces as well. The only thing I would add is that it's some other very clear signs that these are power plays have emerged over the course of the fight. So the fact that the American Legislative Exchange Council is coming up with model bills that they're trying to ram through legislatures across the United States, and that the Texas bill looks just like all the other model bills, very clear sign that it's all about power and that they're trying to create control. The provision surrounding so-called election monitors, which is really as evidenced by a Washington Post piece that was written recently about the Harris County Republican Party down here trying to get 10,000 so-called a so-called brigade of 10,000 monitors who are recruited very specifically. They pointed at majority white neighborhoods to go into majority Black and brown neighborhoods. It's very clearly a sign that they want provocateurs and operatives to create chaos at the polls to keep people from voting. And that's just one of the many different pieces of, or many different points and changes that are embedded in this legislation, in addition to ones that we've seen before, decreasing polls in some areas and increasing them in others, things like that. So it's very clearly about control.
Representative Reynolds, you had mentioned that bill that you had participated in the walkout to fight against. Do you have plans yourself to introduce any legislation to fight any bills that may hinder voter rights?
Well, Jayden, that's a great question, and I'm a big fan of yours. I'm so proud of you at such a young age for being so accomplished and so poised. The thing about the special elections are that the governor, in this particular instance, Governor Abbott, has the sole discretion to decide what is on the call for the special session. So he puts on there, for example, this voter suppression bill. That's the best name for it because it's not a voter integrity bill. Then that is what we have to focus on. So what I plan to do is introduce real solutions like same-day registration, like I had before. I couldn't get a hearing on online voter registration. We're not utilizing technology. Why are we focused on suppressing votes? Why are we not allowing people to make it more convenient that they can vote? I had a bill to repeal the voter ID law that has a disparate impact among people of color. So I plan to reintroduce those bills because they could be related. But Jayden, the sad thing is, just like during the regular session, we couldn't get a hearing. It's probably not likely that I'll get a hearing on those bills to even get those bills to the floor for a full debate and a vote. So the chair of the committee, for example, these bills were referred to the elections committee. The chair of the elections committee in the House is Briscoe Cain. He was the primary author of House Bill 6, which is the companion bill to Senate Bill 7, the voter suppression bill. Chair Briscoe Cain, for edification, was one of the people that flew from Texas to go and argue the frivolous voter fraud case for Donald Trump. And that should give you a kind of understanding of his mindset. And so it is unlikely that Chair Briscoe Cain will allow my bill to get a hearing, but I'm going to continue to file those bills anyway. And it's up to us to make sure that we demand that we move forward with technology to utilize same-day registration, online voter registration, to make voting more accessible. And that is what I'll be focused on, as well as killing this bill when it comes back up. And I think all of us should be able to use our platforms and engage to keep this bill from coming to Texas. Because in addition to it being a bad for democracy, we're going to lose billions of dollars from our Texas economy if this bill passes.
Ms. Davis, you're an activist for voter rights, and you're also an activist for rights for those with disabilities. So do you believe that voter rights and rights for those with disabilities go hand in hand as we approach the election season and access to the polls becomes more difficult, it seems like?
Oh, absolutely. Voting is our voice in the political process, right? So the political process is where decisions are made that are going to impact our lives. The people that we elect create and also vote on legislation that affects us in every aspect of our lives. Decisions are made on school funding, the safety of our water, healthcare, whether or not we have Medicaid expansion, our voting rights, and more. So when our voting rights are being challenged, those cases may end up in the courts to be decided on the judge that we either elect or that we appoint. So when you see legislation in SB 7, which would have limited early voting hours, ban drive-through voting, and require Texas voters to provide proof of disability just to qualify for mail-in voting, those are barriers to voting. So requiring a person to go to a physician verifying their disability status would have been an extra burden on people's ability to vote. So there are people that just do not have reliable transportation and just can't afford to pay the medical costs to prove they have a right to vote. So even in this legislation, like even giving voters rides or assisting a person who cannot enter a polling place without assistance to the polls, would have required like a signed form to acknowledge that, hey, I am disabled. All of this is problematic because there are people that don't believe that you're disabled, especially if you have a disability that isn't physical. So under SB 7, documentation would have had to come from like the Social Security Administration, a licensed physician, a chiropractor, and a Christian Science practitioner. And those are people that believe in spiritual healing, prayers, and avoid going to the doctor at all costs. Thank you.
To Mr. Cohen, Indivisible Houston, an organization you're very active with and you have a very active role in, they inform voters on their rights with regard to what they're allowed to do, what they can't do. Do you believe that Indivisible Houston played a significant role in getting voters out to the polls? And how do you plan to expand on that work that has already been done?
Thank you, Jaden. It's a great question. So the short answer is yes, we've been active in campaigns in the past, and we've been active in voter registration efforts. We also try to show up when other people are doing voter registration efforts. So we take a pretty broad cut when it comes to that. A lot of our work has been in messaging and amplification, whether it was individual legislators or if it was on this issue in particular. So the short answer is yes, we do plenty of voter registration, things like that, but we'll also draw attention to some of the people who should be speaking up in our area when it comes to issues like this. Throughout the session, as Representative Reynolds pointed out, this is going to result in a large loss of revenue in the state of Texas, and in particularly in Harris County. What we've seen is a movement, both an inside and an outside movement, to put pressure on the business community to make a statement. And we've been mainly on, our goal has been to talk directly to the public about that, although we are in connection with people who have direct conversations with people inside of some of the larger business communities. In Houston, the biggest business voice is called the Greater Houston Partnership. They're basically our chamber. If you trace the lineage, they've been around for a really long time. And they have been very non-committal, which is interesting because, well, it's disheartening in a way, but it's interesting because they made a very, very robust statement about the importance of racial equity after the murder of George Floyd. And so that has come back around to put pressure back on them, because now they're kind of silent in the face of everything that they promised everyone that they would do when all of that was happening. Because it's easy for business communities to do the popular thing, but when it comes to doing the right thing, that's a different discussion. If you look at some of the fight outside of Greater Houston Partnership and inside of Greater Houston Partnership, if you Google it, you'll see some of the pressure that's happened in Houston. And in fact, that has led to a splitting of the partnership in some respects, that there were 10 people who came out and said, we don't support this. They were traditional family voices, as well as, and more importantly, I should say, leaders of the Black community in Houston, who directly came out and made sure to say that our chamber should be saying more. And all the latest that they came to was that they oppose voter suppression, they oppose voter intimidation, but they're not quite ready to come out against the bill. But everybody has seen exactly where they stand because of that pressure. So that's a lot of the work that we've been doing specifically related to the fight, but we will definitely do electoral work and registration work as well.
Representative Reynolds, do you believe that these bills are good intention, that people that are drafting them have good intentions? And do you believe that they're just an inconvenience to Black voters, or is it more sinister in your opinion?
Jaden, I'm going to be very candid with you. And I don't know people's heart, but the data does not support what they're trying to promote. In other words, this is a solution in search of a problem. Our own Texas Secretary of State came out on the record under oath and said that there was no massive voter fraud in the 2020 elections. So what are we trying to do? If there was a real legitimate problem and we were trying to fix it, it would be more credible, right? And more plausible. But this simply is a extension of the big lie that former President Trump stated when he went around the country demanding that they overturn in these lawsuits that there was massive voter fraud and voter irregularity. Somehow the Democrats cheated in order for him to win. There are so many dead people voting, illegals voting, people voting twice, and people rigging the machines. No, none of that's true. The thing that is true is that we know that from verifiable intelligence that Russia did interfere with our elections to benefit him, but they didn't investigate that. There was no investigation. So the real investigation in terms of voter fraud and voter irregularities, they didn't want to address. So I have to believe that they're very disingenuous when they perpetuate things that they know are not true in order to win an election. Me personally, I don't believe in winning at all costs. I believe in winning fairly based on the issues and my platform, taking my message to my constituents, and then may the best person win. But not if winning by cheating, meaning that I have to stack the deck in order to win. And that's what they're simply trying to do. They're trying to stack the deck, as Joy laid out, to put many impediments. Here's the question, Jaden. Why is it that they were trying to limit souls to the polls, Sunday voting, where they know African Americans have a history of voting? And then they say, oh, guess what? That was a typographical error. That is crap. When they said you can't vote before 1, that should have been 11. But then they doubled down when they was questioned about it in the Senate. Then you got other instances where they want to limit where mobile voting. They want to limit hours of voting. They want to limit so many different things that they want to do. Why? How is this helping democracy? They want to make it more difficult to vote. Texas is already one of the most difficult places in the country to vote, and they want to make it more and more difficult, which is unpatriotic, it's un-Texan. So to answer your question succinctly, I believe that they know that they are perpetuating lies in order to justify these bad policies that they know will limit the number of African Americans, Hispanics, and disabled people that traditionally overwhelmingly vote Democrat, and that will help them stay in power. To me, that is the lowest of the low when you will win at all costs, even if it means you're disenfranchising minority communities.
So, Ms. Davis, what changes do you believe need to be made in order to promote active voter participation in the elections? In 2020, we saw lots of voter participation. A lot of people were going out to the polls, but do you believe that will be the same case in the future? And do you believe that there are some solid changes that need to be made so that that trend of more people of color voting continues?
Right. So right now, I believe we need to make the voting process easier and not even more difficult than it already is. Texas has some of the strictest voter ID laws in the country. The legislation the GOP tried to pass under SB 7 would have amounted to voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement, and would have created felonies for the simple act of mailing off a mail-in mailing application to a voter who is 65 years or older that would be eligible, but just didn't solicit it. Now, can you imagine that? Me sending an application so you can vote by mail would cause a felony for me to have. And that is just, that's ridiculous. So I stand wholeheartedly in support of the Democratic walkout at the Texas State Capitol. So let me give you a couple of examples of how different the laws here in Texas compare to Illinois, so you can see exactly what we're already up against and why we've been fighting this battle. You all have same-day registration. We don't. You all have automatic voter registration. We don't. You all, in some cases, don't have to present an ID to vote. We definitely have to do that. You don't have to have an excuse to utilize absentee voting mail-in ballot. In Texas, you do. You have to have a disability. You have to be pregnant. You have to be out of the state during the entire early voting period, and I think election day. So even in Illinois, you can request up to 2 hours off of work to go and vote. I don't think we can do that. And so I think that ways to encourage participation would be organizations actively engaging in the communities, not just during elections, because then people are going to feel like you only come out during election season and we don't have a presence any other time. We also need to know that there is a digital divide. So we need to have boots on the ground in those communities, having conversations, asking what their needs are, having those difficult conversations. We also need to target low propensity voters and find out why they aren't voting. Is it because of the candidate? Is it because of the voting process? Is it intimidating? Is it because of their personal beliefs? And we just need to find out that information. And I think once we do all that, we'll keep moving on. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, you had mentioned this briefly, but misinformation played a significant role in 2020, and a lot of people were receiving calls telling them not to vote, and there were different things circulating on social media, different posts for reasons people shouldn't vote. How do you believe that the U.S. can better combat misinformation and really, and stop it when it begins? So, what does that process look like in your mind, and how can we better promote active voter participation by combating these issues?
That's a great question. I'll start off by saying, I'll hedge by pointing out, that there are a lot of folks who have PhDs in sort of figuring out how to get around misinformation, not just in context of voting, but in context of all issues. We're seeing a lot of the very same dirty tricks. And I think in some cases, people actually believing it in terms of a rank and file when it comes to vaccines, right? That we see a lot of this misinformation that's put out there. And some of those misinformation movements have professionalized, where you see people who once maybe didn't really think about optics, now going down to the Capitol, dressed in the same shirts or suit and tie or things like that. And I think any of the legislators in Austin can speak to that, and I'm sure in other parts of the US too. One of the things that has helped has been regulation, frankly, of platforms. I think that people a lot of times, I think that there's an update that's going on with the recognition of harm surrounding some of this rhetoric and what's going on, that there's actually measurable harm. The discussion surrounding free speech gets twisted pretty often, and it's good that there are people out there who are educating people on how it should go down, because we do limit certain types of harm that come from voice, right? You're not allowed to put a contract murder on someone. You're not allowed to blackmail people, right? If you actually break down blackmail as a law, the individual parts, you could argue that it's not illegal to say something, to either share information or not, and it's not illegal to either accept money or not. But at some point in time, people decided that that was harmful, and so we don't do it. And you're not allowed to do that, and we can't have people going around threatening people like that. That's kind of, I know I've gone around the bend, but I think that you need to see regulation, and I think that a lot of the efforts that foundations are putting together are positive for rapid response, war room response to a lot of it. I also think that the party and activist groups across the nation have a role in this, because it's hard to get to the bottom of misinformation if you frame your message right. Because even if people try to use misinformed talking points to get around a message, then if you had a strong enough communication strategy to begin with, then it's very difficult for that misinformation to rise to the top. So we've been very careful, for example, not to mention, I'll do it in this circle, but in terms of to a public camera, we don't talk about voter fraud, because we don't repeat lies. So we don't say there was no voter fraud. We just don't even address it. I mean, it's pretty clear that everybody, if we never bring it up, then they don't have the room to do it. You will notice that the way that the Republican Party does this is that the second that you oppose SB 7 in Texas, some member of the peanut gallery will say, I just don't understand why people don't want you to have an ID to vote. That's the first thing they go toward, because that's the ground that they know that they can rest on, which covers up a whole iceberg of misinformation that's behind that. So I think tightening up messaging, frankly, going on offense and filling up the airwaves with the truth so that you get out in front is a good way to crowd out the misinformation that could possibly come in. So that's my approach.
Representative Reynolds, you can go on any social media site, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and you can find posts from someone who says, well, I just believe that Democrats are taking advantage of the Black community to promote this and create fake anger or outrage over the election. Do you believe that's truly the case, or do you believe that there are just people that are misinformed on what Democrats really want?
Well, I think that people are misinformed on what Democrats really want. I think the outrage is in most instances is authentic and genuine and justified. There's so many adversities and systemic racism that's perpetuated in this society, and we can see, for example, we saw firsthand with the way that the protesters were met under the Black Lives Matter movement, the peaceful protesters in the wake of George Floyd after the pandemic marching and protesting for social justice. We saw how Colin Kaepernick was treated when he took a knee peacefully when the when the national anthem was saying, right, against social justice. But then we saw how they were treated, and many of them were arrested and harassed, and it ruined his NFL career. Then you juxtapose that with the insurrectionists, who were mostly Anglo, that stormed the Capitol on January 6th in an attempt to overthrow a legitimate election, that people were mostly white, armed, assaulted police officers, had Congress go into barricades and have to shelter in place, and then they were met with almost kid gloves and hello. So people see that Black lives don't really matter in the sense that the way that they're treated by law enforcement. And I think people are saying enough is enough, that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So that outrage is justified. And if you say something about it, then you're playing the race card, then you're playing the victim card, not that you're just trying to articulate your frustration with a system that has historically discriminated against you and treated you differently. We only want to be treated like Dr. King's dream, that we would be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. So I do believe it's legitimate. And I do believe that a lot of times we're misunderstood when we're trying to articulate and get others to understand and embrace that frustration.
Finally, I want to pose this question to all of you. What's your end goal here? What are all the things that you guys want to accomplish ahead of the next election? And do you believe those changes will take more time, or do you believe this is something that can happen in a span of weeks or months?
So my end goal is I want Governor Abbott out of office. I want the lieutenant governor out of office. I want the commissioner out of office, because we need change. We need progressive candidates to run, and we need them to win, because we literally have people's lives at stake. So while they're pushing these bills, that they canceled our critical race theory, right? So if you've ever heard the 1619 Project and how wonderful that is, they literally are trying to ban it all over the state so people cannot teach it. But yet they passed the Texas 1836 Project. And so nothing happened. No major reforms happened that would help for, when we had our winter storm. Thousands of people lost power. I mean, not thousands. I think we had more than, but I'm just going to say thousands of people lost power. People died. I would scroll my timeline and I wouldn't see anything but my friends that had burst pipes. That's all I kept seeing. People with burst pipes, ceilings collapsing, all of that. And they did not care. They did not care. And so my thing is, we need Medicaid expansion. We need candidates to run for that. And like, we have people who are literally dying here, and we need candidates that care. And so I'm willing to put in the work. And that's something that we do at Move On. We believe that change is made from our activism, is that the elected officials that we are targeting. No, we will not just sit back and allow these blatant violations on our rights and our assault on our democracy to go unchecked without pushback and direct action. The GOP may have the elected position, but we are making sure that our voices are being heard and that we are being seen. So one thing that we did, we had a digital billboard that had Ted Cruz's face on there, going around, everybody knowing what a horrible job that he did. And we posted it right there at the federal office where he's stationed. And then we took that billboard all over the state. But before we did that, we took it to his wife's job at the Greater Houston Partnership. So you don't get to sit here and just treat us like we are worth nothing, and you want us to vote for you, and you want to run for these elected positions. So those are things that I'm fighting for, and I'm fighting against that. And I want to see some of our progressive candidates get elected. Thank you.
Rep, I'll let you close if that's cool. I'll do something short and then give you the floor. Look, I second everything that Joy said. I heard one of the Working Families Party leaders say that They wanted to create a democracy that everybody can see themselves in and that can actually be in and take part in. And the United States doesn't have that. And Texas in particular does not have that. And we're in a really unusual place historically, a place with a lot of, that has undergone a lot of intimidation and pain in Houston explicitly and in Fort Bend County and in this area, because this is, in many ways, it was the southwest corner of the Confederacy. And it was a commercial center. And the three areas surrounding Harris County, three of the surrounding counties were 70% comprised of slave populations entering the Civil War. This is a very specific place where we are. So we have a lot of work to do here across a wide variety of issues. And it has become somewhat partisan in framing, but I don't think that it's partisan altogether. That the people, I think a good example of that is, look at who, so the municipal police forces that brutalized protesters in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Some of that, unfortunately, I wish it was all on one side of the aisle entirely, but nationally, I think you'll find something different. So I think we have a lot of work to do all together. I am heartened by the solidarity and the unity of the Democrats in this area when it comes to SB 7 and HB 6 and the fight that they've been taking on. I will say that the mayor and county judge here have been on the right side of that fight. They've been pressuring the business community. But in terms of creating a large, and in terms of that, I'm very heartened by that. And I'd like to make sure that we do everything we can to try to defeat those bills and make sure that we're protecting the right to vote. And I think we should go at all costs. I think if we've seen legislators walk out before in 2003 in Texas, if you Google the killer D's, you'll see that there were Democrats that literally left the state to try to keep quorum from coming back. I think whatever it takes to do, if we need to all walk into Austin and come over the hillside and walk into the legislature, from Houston and Dallas and San Antonio, then we should do that. Whatever it is that we need to do to try to make a really emphatic statement, that's the next fight. But the longer term vision beyond that is a democracy that everybody gets to take part in. And specifically in terms of Houston, solving the Houston specific challenges that prevent that down here.
Wow, I'm glad I got a chance to go behind them because they laid out a great foundation, and I really am very proud of both Joy and Daniel, and I appreciate all of our millennials and our emerging leaders that are speaking truth to power unapologetically, that are on the front lines every day, not from an Eiffel Tower or from a boardroom, but on the streets, talking to the regular people, trying to get people involved and engaged, knocking on doors, using messaging, petitions, social media, all various platforms to get that message communicated, and then holding elected officials accountable. A lot of times, people get comfortable and complacent, even Democrats. And I'm very, very proud of you all pushing the conversation forward and really challenging us to be stronger and to be more progressive and be more engaged and then challenging incumbents sometimes, even in primaries and other elections. So it's not a one size fits all approach. It's all of the above. You have to do everything. It is not conventional. It is, we're really, Mahatma Gandhi said it this way: we must be the change that we wish to see in this world. All of us. We can't wait for the next Malcolm X, the next Martin Luther King, the next Obama. We all must be the one. We're the ones we've been waiting on. We're the change that we want to see. If it is to be, it's up to me. All of us have a responsibility to make our democracy work better by being engaged. We can't sit an armchair quarterback and complain about what this person's not doing, what that person's not doing. What are we doing? If it is to be, it's up to me. I have to be, engaged. What am I doing? How am I helping to make it better? You don't have to be an elected official. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have an education. Every one of us has some God-given abilities that you can utilize to be a change agent. And that's really what I want you all to leave with, is that we all are in this collectively together. United we stand, divided we fall. If we continue to put our resources together, regardless of Black, white, Hispanic, young, old, rich, poor, if we all have a common goal and we stand united, then there's no one or nothing that can stop us. We are a powerful force, but we sometimes allow divisions to divide us, and then they throw us off. Well, east side versus west side, or this person versus that person. So my message is this: is that we have to get united, work to get people that are responsive to our demands when it comes to good public policy, and then making sure that no one gets a pass. I mean, no matter black, Hispanic, look at their record. Our record speaks for where we stand on the issues, and our records are public. And I'm not going to call any names, but sometimes people within black or Hispanic or Democrat, they sell out to special interests, and they sell their communities out, and guess what? They don't need to be representing those districts. So you all have a great responsibility in continuing to shape the conversation and holding us accountable. And I'm so encouraged to see all the young people, specifically on this Zoom today, that are engaged in this fight. It's going to be the young people that help us get out of a lot of the mess that we're in now. Voting at record numbers, just like you came out for Obama in 08. We want that same energy with the millennials. That's the way we're going to change and get rid of Joy, Governor Abbott, and Lieutenant Governor Patrick. We need a total change in leadership in the state, from Senator Cruz to Senator Cornyn, both who voted against funding for our communities under the CARES Act, both who voted against a commission to study what happened on January 6th with the insurrectionists. I mean, that's shameful. They both should be having to be forced to resign. Both were disappeared when you mentioned Joy, Winter Storm Uri. We didn't see Ted Cruz fled to Cancun Ted. Cornyn, he was nowhere to be seen. And then they criticized AOC, who flew here from New York, raised millions of dollars, and they want to criticize her every step of the way. I'll take AOC over them any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So I'm empowered, I'm encouraged, I'm fired up. I'm looking forward to working with you all as we enter a special session, and then beyond, as we change the electorate to get more progressives in public office at the top, from the governor all the way down to our city councils and school boards and commissioners and justice of the peace. Elections matter at all levels of government. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the roundtable portion of today's discussion, and we're now going to take questions from everyone else on the call.
Okay, so I know there are several questions in the chat box, but before I go to those, I want to say thank you to Jayden Jefferson. One thing you guys do not know about this young man, he's 13 years old. Power, power, power. That's all I can say. And now I will go into the questions. I am just absolutely blown away. So thank you so much, Jayden. I saw a question that was specifically for Joy. Let me get a minute here to find it. And I believe it was from Casey. Casey, if I can't find it, can you just quickly come off mute and ask that question yourself, please?
Sure. Yeah, it was for Joy, and it was about how you were saying that they're trying to make people with disabilities have to prove it to get a absentee ballot. And isn't that illegal from the ADA in the first place? And is there potential to take that part of it to court?
Exactly. So there's going to be like HIPAA violations. A lot of that stuff is going to be unconstitutional, and that will most likely be overturned in the courts. And so, and that's something that they don't mind wasting. And when they say they want to be conservative, I'm like, well, why are you claiming to be conservative when all of this is going to cost tax dollars? Because we're going to challenge it, and we're going to sue. Because I was a part of the they tried to overturn like drive-through, the votes that were cast at a drive-through location. Well, I have a disability, and so I could choose curbside voting if I wanted to, but I had just flown in from Washington, D.C., and the first thing I wanted to get when I made it to Texas was to vote. Mm-hmm. And so I went to a drive-through location, cast my ballot and everything, and they tried to overturn it. There's nothing illegal about casting a ballot at a drive-through location. And we went to the Court of Appeals, and they kept denying it. They were like, no, it's fine. That your case has no merit. But that costs to do that. And they're willing to do all kinds of things that are just illegal, and that's going to be violating our rights in hopes that it will pass. But it's going to be delayed because we're going to fight it. So whatever these little things they're trying to do, trust and believe, we're going to fight back. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. The next question is from Lauren, and I believe it's probably going to be for Representative Reynolds. And she asked, are the House Democrats committed to walking out again during the special session if we end up just with bad bills going through again? And how can we support you in this fight?
Well, that's an excellent question. And we haven't made a definitive decision at this moment. We're discussing all options available, and we will assess that and make prudent decisions after consulting with each other in the caucus, as well as other legal experts. We do know, just like Joy answered the last question, there's going to be a lot of litigation. We're going to sue if they are successful in these discriminatory, unconstitutional bills that infringe upon liberties. But I don't know at this point if we will break quorum again. I've already put it on record that I will be willing to walk and break quorum in the event that there was a consensus to do that. So some of us are very willing. Other Democrats have been more hesitant, and so they need a push and a nudge. But I think we have to keep all options on the table. There's nothing that I want to take off the table. That was on the fourth time, just for edification, that was on the fourth time in the Texas history that a successful quorum was broken in this state. And Daniel mentioned the last time with the killer bees in 2003. But there was only the fourth time. So it's not something that routinely happens. But I think this is, when you're talking about taking away people's voting rights, something so fundamental that people risk their lives for. Am I willing to risk quorum? Yes, absolutely. And do I think we should consider it? Absolutely. So we will definitely be deliberating. And we don't know when Governor Abbott's going to call the special session, but we need to be ready to do anything to keep our democracy alive in this state. Right now, we're making a push, and some of us are going up to Washington, D.C. next week to push for the passage of HR1, SR1, the For the People Act, and HR4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. If Congress passes that, then there's no need for us to break quorum. So a lot depends on what Congress does. We want the United States Senate, and particularly Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema, to get off of their behind and join in and kill the filibuster so that we can pass those meaningful bills to protect democracy in this country. If that doesn't pass, then I think we should strongly consider a quorum break.
Thank you for that response. This is just a comment that I think is worthy of being shared. It's for Jaden. And Sherry Joyer says, Jaden, you keep doing what you're doing. We're all better because you're in this world and an agent of transformation. So thank you for that, Sherry. I don't see any, I see a lot of comments, but don't see any particular questions. And we're right at the very end anyway. And so I think we're just going to pause here. And our next step would be to ask for, and I think we've already heard it, calls to action. Let's just say, for example, I'm an indivisible leader here in Illinois, and really an active member of Move On also. And so for both of those groups, how could I, as a person or a leader of the group, really be strategic in helping you, Daniel, and you, Representative Reynolds, and you, Joy Davis? What can we do? I'll start with Daniel first.
That's a good question. So I think, as a fellow indivisibling, right, we focus on local defensive pressure a lot of times and local forward momentum when it comes to our own bills. So of course, calling our representatives and supporting HR1 and HR4, to make sure that a lot of that the federal government has domain over a lot of things that the states are trying to do, and that it better equips the court fights that Joy referenced later on, so that we can spend less time and resources behind the 8 ball on those and more time kind of in front of it. And that's even if you're, a lot of people, I think it doesn't feel like it's worth it to call your Republican representative, but you should jam their phone lines, because there's a staffer in that office that you're going to be talking to. and they need to hear from it. And in addition to that, they are individual constituents themselves. And in addition to that, some of the conversations, even in the worst legislators' offices, even Cancun Cruz and a lot of these other folks, right? The conversations behind closed doors are different than the ones that are happening in front of the cameras. And maybe Representative Reynolds may have a better idea about what that looks like too, and may even be able to speak to that. But there are times when staffers say to their boss, like, I'm sorry, it's over, because too many people are angry about this. So that stuff does shine through. So do street actions, of course, if you have the bandwidth for that, but also thinking outside the box. Have you heard your local Chamber of Commerce made a statement about voter suppression in the United States? Have they come out and actually stood up for democracy? What about the large nonprofits in your backyard? What about the large associations that are in your city? Some of the organizations out there are billed as progressive, but then when you look at who they've actually endorsed and why they endorse them, there's room for you to squeeze them too and to pressure them too. There have been Emily's List candidates where I look at it and say, I'm not voting for this person, right? That I'm not going to support this candidate because of their past history on, say, immigration or on other measures. So get everybody on record, right? Start opening that conversation, get everybody on record and pull out all the stops and do what Occupy co-creator Michael White called wobble, where come up with a series of steps. Most campaigns have a series of issue campaigns have a series of steps where you're finding milestones along the way. But in that back and forth, you're also trying to make sure that the people that you're pressuring are not expecting the thing that you're doing necessarily. So it's good to use those traditional methods, the social media storms, which is, I guess, not that traditional at this point, but has been used a little bit. It's good to do the phone jams. It's good to show up at offices, but how can you surprise them? How can you get some of these power figures on their heels? And if you want to go that next level, if you want to pick up a call to action, call your reps, write them letters, write editorials, make sure to get in their offices, make sure to set up meetings with them. If you want to go that next step, think about how you can actually wobble the fight back and forth, because there's all kinds of stuff that you can do that they're not going to expect. Representatives, power players in chambers, they've got all kinds of things that they're focused on. They cannot prepare for every single thing that you might come up with. And if you have a creative idea, more than likely they haven't had it yet. So you can implement it and they're not going to expect it. And you can get a little bit of a splash and that can ramp up the pressure. So that's what I would encourage. Maybe if you want extra credit beyond just calling your rep, that's what you can do.
Thank you for that, Daniel. And I will probably follow up with you later on. Thank you. Has everyone commented?
So something that I would do is get involved in the campaigns. Learn phone banking if you don't know. Learn text banking. Learn canvassing, because all of this is important and all of this is needed to help candidates win. Donate to a progressive candidates campaign. Try to do what you can like that, and then do social media, do tweeting, and talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get them involved, and let them know that their vote does count, and they would not be fighting this hard and trying to pass through this horrible legislation to take away our rights to vote if it didn't matter. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for that. I feel so very motivated. Just really appreciate you guys being here. And before we're at the very end now, so we're at the end of our questions. But before we close out, I would like for Joy, Daniel, Sana, and Darrell to remain, and Jayden to remain on the call, please. But for the rest of you guys, thank you so much. But I want to say one thing to Rep. Reynolds. I saw the photo that you guys took there in Austin, and standing behind you was a friend of mine, Gary Bledsoe.
Oh, Gary, I love Gary. Gary, I'm gonna tell him I met you. Gary is a mentor of mine, and as a former local president of the NAACP, he has really helped me matriculate well before I was a state representative. So Gary is amazing. I can't say enough about him. He has been so instrumental with the legislative fights that we've had from upcoming redistricting to SB 7 and strategy. And he even helped me make the decision that the quorum break was, I can say this publicly now, was the right thing to do, as well as the church that we went to after we broke quorum. He recommended that church in Austin. So hats off to Gary Bledsoe. I can't say enough about him. So he's a giant among giants.
Yeah, he wears a big hat for sure. I actually worked with Gary on 12th Street in the NAACP office when I lived in office teaching there.
Wow.
So it was an honor. It was such an honor. And I need his contact. I've lost contact with him. So if you have his contact information, please send it to me.
I will
would love to get him on a call like this too, and just to regroup. It was him and attorney Victor Good. We all worked together in our office on 12th Street.
Wow. Well, I'll make sure I get that to you. And I'm glad to see Darrell Douglas on here. He's another great freedom fighter. And
hang out with us for a minute then.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know that seems like just not enough words, but I really appreciate it. And there are a lot of Move On friends on here. Casey, Amanda, all you guys, thank you so for being diligent. There's Donna and one of our members of our local indivisible group. I think Lisa's already gone. There's Bob Schroyer. Bob Schroyer and I organized this group together, not just the two of us. And Kate too, we're all part of this. It was just like, and they've been around since 2017. So it's awesome to see you guys here. I'm doing too much talking. My son always tells me that, but I'm just excited you guys showed up. This is awesome. Yeah, Casey, I'm glad you made it. Casey has a friend. Yeah. Who's your friend? Who's with you, Casey?
This is my friend Eliza Willison.
Oh,
and my mom. Oh, did my mom hang? Oh, my mom's right there, Penny Weiss.
Oh my gosh. Oh, she's been on here before though.
I don't think so, no.
The name looks so familiar, but welcome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we'll catch up later. All right, thank you guys. So the people from Texas, I need y'all to hang out just for a second. And Jayden, thank you guys. So Darrell and Sana, are y'all just hiding behind the screen just because?
I look rough, Evelyn.
There he is. There you
I
are.
haven't wiped my face.
I've never
or
seen
anything.
y'all hide behind screens before. What's up with that?
We're all in bed.
Get dressed up for these. It's Sunday, so I haven't. This is like my
Right.
look.
Y'all look good.
You do. You look just great. Oh my gosh. I have to tell you something, Daniel. Okay, Tina, are you still there?
Tina Kingshill, she's from Houston too. Daniel and I know Tina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Show your face there. In Texas are showing their face, Tina. Show your face.
No makeup, no makeup.
That's okay. We still love you. That's what Texas are.
This was last minute. No makeup.
Okay. You're off the hook this time. You're off the hook this time. I'll tell y'all what now. I can get into my drawl now because y'all are Texans. This is blowing my mind. I love it, love it, love it. Daniel, I have to tell you something. The three of you, Daniel, Rep Reynolds, and Joy. Sana and I work together and Move On. So here I go posting my stuff on the Move On. And I'm mobilized to win. And she pops on, all these good people. I know them. It was like, oh my gosh, small world, small world. This is so exciting. And I know Darrell knows everybody because everybody knows Darrell and loves Darrell. So this is like a family reunion for you guys, isn't it?
It is.
I just want y'all to get a chance to chat. That's why I'm hanging out here for a second. And to really pounce on Jayden. 13 years old. I can't get over it. I can't get over it. You, as they say in England, it was off the chart, dude. It was off the chart. I did not do anything to help him with the questions, not one thing. Those are all, that's his strategy. And I'm telling you, I'm just blown away.
Jayden's amazing. I was nervous. I'm like, look, I know he brings it. I'm nervous. I'm gonna have fun. And I'm like, Lord, I hope he doesn't kill me.
Crazy. His poise was so.
Naomi Osaka, and then he's gonna interview us. I'm like, oh, let's bring it. I said, I'm so excited. I said, I'm just excited.
He seemed like a seasoned veteran. I mean, just natural, right? He seemed like he should be nationally syndicated. He's a sharp, impressive young man. It's good to see. I think he's going places.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want everybody to see him. And, you know, I know his mother is somewhere in the background. She does not want to be seen, but she is an awesome, awesome leader. Otherwise, he wouldn't be where he is today. So hats off to his mother for sure. And his contact information for you guys is in the chat box. You know, if you need to have an interview done, I have a speaker, this is Jaden. I really want
Jaden,
to.
we have to remember his name, get his autograph, get a picture with him
I've
today.
been interviewed by Jayden Jefferson. I'm just going to brag about that. I have been interviewed by the Jayden Jefferson.
Exactly.
And if it's like, if he's 13 now, like, was he 10 the first time we saw him? Like
11.
Yeah. Wow.
He just a couple of years ago.
I would say I was not doing that at 11. That's what I'll say. Yeah, you were phenomenal. I mean,
absolutely
phenomenal.
And what's really exciting, Jayden, is the fact that if you're here now at 13, by the time you're like 20 or 25, like, wow, like the trajectory, I think, is what everyone is so excited about.
Thank you. Thank
He's
you.
running for our jobs, Darrell, in like 2 years.
Yeah, seriously.
And I'm here for it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
What's crazy, one of the first campaigns I knocked on doors for was Representative Reynolds' campaign. His campaign office was in Missouri City next to a Popeyes. I wonder if he remembers that, in 2008. But he lost that year, but he came back and won that for that next primary. And he's been one of the firebrands, one of the, like, he's like part of the squad for Texas, like straight up. So
Yeah. See, I didn't know that. So I'm gonna put Joy in the spot right now. I'll tell you what I did, Rep Reynolds. I actually reached out to Dora because I follow her advocacy in the Houston area, and she's always doing something. So I'm thinking I really want to enhance our celebration for our Juneteenth, our 1 year milestone. And so I saw Gary Bledsoe in that photo with all the Democrats there. And so I reached out and asked Joy if she had the contact information for Gary Bledsoe. You know what she did? She said, I think Rep Reynolds would probably be a good one.
Well, hey,
we want to share that with Gary Bledsoe, though.
I appreciate that. And I just put Gary Bledsoe's cell phone in the chat. He won't mind me giving it to you.
Oh,
But
awesome.
I'm a big fan of Darrell, Joy, and Daniel. I mean, this is a superstar group right here. Super progressives in the movement. And I love all of them. Such great energy, and they stay woke. That's for sure. And we need more like them. And I hope that they'll consider public office one day, or whatever platform, whatever arena they play in. They are amazing, always prepared, always fearless. And some people are intimidated by that. Some people that are elected officials, y'all know who they are. They're intimidated by you guys being outspoken, but I've always applauded you guys for using your platforms unapologetically to do it. And I hope you guys will continue to stay engaged. But yeah, you all are phenomenal. I mean,